When he woke, it was cold and damp, and the fire was a pile of smoking ash. The moon was new and unseen. Boromir rubbed the back of his neck and looked around at the grey dawn. Lostel was standing by an eyeglass bush, grazing. He leaned over and tossed a couple of dry chumps on the fire, then forced himself to stand. He still felt a little queasy, and his head was pounding. He patted his surcoat and felt a lump. He reached inside his tunic and held up a small phial with his fingertips. It held a dark brown liquid. He uncorked the phial and gave it a sniff. He remembered sipping at the bottle in the night. For his headache, the stranger had explained. He took a sip before stuffing the phial back inside his surcoat. As he left the sheepfold, Lostal raised her head and nickered as she turned towards him. He took the reins and stroked her neck, smiling as he reached inside a pack. As he pulled at the handle of his frying pan, he inadvertently scooped something else out, a small package wrapped in wax paper. He pressed it to his nose and took a tentative sniff. His mouth watered as he closed his eyes, breathed in the smell of ripe cheese. He rummaged again and found another package, this one long and flat. Later, as he waited for a knob of lard to melt, he sat on a stone next to the fire and unwrapped the side of salt pork. He thanked his anonymous benefactor as he cut 2 slices and laid them in the pan.
Are you not curious?
Oh, you're awake.
He stood and returned to Lostal.
It matters not. I'm well again.
Boromir started to take stock of the rest of his gear. He noticed that something was missing.
What is it?
My father's letter. It's missing.
Oh, Boromir.
She sounded disappointed.
Why did you not set out from Adoras earlier? You would have been in Rivendell by now.
What has that to do with...
Perhaps your father should have sent Faramir after all.
Boromir ignored the voice. But there was a part of him that regretted not returning to Helm's Deep to warn them about Saruman.
He did sound familiar, though.
He continued to take stock of his belongings, pulling various packages out of his packs, as well as some apples and a rabbit, before replacing them.
Perhaps you should start thinking about rationing your food.
Perhaps you should be quiet for a while.
Lostal plodded slowly along the muddy line that was the North Road. Here it had become little more than a barely beaten path, perhaps 6 inches wide and bordered with hummocks of spiky deer sedge that spread out into the murk to either side. It seemed to be frequented mainly by foxes and rabbits, judging from the scat. Beyond the road, the ruins of towns and villages serrated the uncertain horizon. The rain was unrelenting, and the landscape around him seemed hemmed in by low grey cloud. Boromir felt as though he were merely treading water.
Not that you've done that for a while.
Please, Mother, won't you give me a moment's peace?
The road dipped down and crossed a wide stream over a tree bridge. 3 logs had been roughly levelled off and looked fairly new. Boromir looked over his shoulder at his new friend. She was ever present behind them, always on the edge of the horizon. At first, she'd been like a bothersome wasp on a late summer's day, but now she felt more like a circling buzzard. Lostal paused where the land started to rise towards the east. Boromir looked off up the slope at a large, dark outcrop of rock. There was movement there, and then men were rushing down the slope, waving hack-knives and clubs above their heads. Boromir drew his sword. He nudged Lostal's flanks, and she burst into a canter. The road levelled out through a field of large boulders and bushes. Lostal faltered as more robbers appeared from behind the nearest rocks. Boromir looked behind, hoping despairingly for some aid from his pursuer, but she was gone. The brigands were rushing towards him from east and north, and before he could take Lostal away, they were surrounding them, waving and jabbing wooden pikes. They wore loose tunics and hose of rough deer hide, and their beards and hair were filthy and unkempt. They smelled almost as bad as orcs. Boromir turned Lostal, trying to find a gap in the gathering band of robbers. He raised his sword, and some of the brigands staggered back at the sight of it. They looked about wildly and made guttural noises like distressed animals. Indeed, some of them scattered like startled birds. He swiped and chopped at a few of the pikes, but then he felt one jab at his lower back. Spinning Lostal round, he hacked at the offending weapon. As he pulled back on his reins, he felt hands on him, and now he was sliding from his saddle. He crossed his sword arm over and jabbed at the nearest robber, but their numbers were overwhelming. As he saw the injured brigand slide down among the legs of his fellows, Boromir was dragged after him. He felt hands tugging at his scabbard and his cloak, his shield, his bow, and then his baldric was being yanked over his head. Boromir reached out for the great horn of Gondor, his heirloom, but it was gone. Lostal reared up, scattering some of the robbers. She kicked others. Boromir looked up pleadingly at the dense wall of men above him. He felt as though he'd fallen into a well that was collapsing in on him. He could see little, but one of the robbers became tense as an arrow pierced his neck. The others stared at him as a second arrow appeared in one of their fellows' chest. An explosion of light flashed across Boromir's vision as a blow to the back of his head twisted the world sideways. His eyes rolled as he tried to stay conscious. But then he felt his legs buckle beneath him as he heard a loud cry, as though a Mumak had found these villains and were ready to charge. He tried to keep his eyes open to catch a glimpse of the great beast, but there was nothing, save for another bright flash of light. He tried to fight the grasping hands off, but he was falling, not into a well, but into a soft, warm pit of darkness. They called the summer house Ithbar, the House of Peace. Boromir's grandfather, Ecthelion, had had it built for his family as a refuge from the hustle and bustle of Minas Tirith. Nowadays, Finduilas brings her boys here to escape the sense of dread that is filling the city from the growing threat from Minas Morgul. The carriage swings round a large courtyard and pulls up outside the doors. Servants come to greet Mother, Boromir and Faramir. 2 footmen help the boys down from the carriage. The master of the house, Bergil, helps Mother with her bag. He has turned grey since Boromir last saw him and looks older than his 60 years. The brothers run past the house along the south terrace towards the river. Boromir hears Mother say,
Follow them, would you, Bergil?
And he turns to see the master huffing and puffing after them. The wide lawn at the back of the house falls gently from river terrace to the water's edge. A family of swans idles on the water next to the small jetty. Sunlight scintillates on the wide green river. The undulating green hills of Emin Arnon in the hazy distance frame the ships passing each other in midstream. Faramir chases Boromir across the grass.
Boys, stay on the grass,
Calls Bergil, but Faramir is already chasing Boromir along the jetty.
Stay on the grass, Boromir. Stay on the grass.
So Boromir jumps into the river.